Features of absolute liability. The principle of absolute liability was evolved by the Supreme Court of India in the landmark case of Mehta v. Union of India. This rule is stricter than strict liability and was developed to meet the needs of modern industrial society. The main features are explained below in clear, exam-friendly language. Liability without proof of negligence. Under absolute liability, the defendant is liable even if all reasonable care was taken. The plaintiff does not need to prove negligence, fault, or intention on the part of the defendant. No exceptions are allowed. Unlike strict liability, no exceptions such as act of God, third-party act, or plaintiff's fault are permitted. Once harm is caused, the enterprise is automatically liable, irrespective of circumstances. Applies only to hazardous or inherently dangerous activities. Absolute liability applies only when an enterprise is engaged in hazardous or inherently dangerous activities, such as handling toxic chemicals, gas, explosives, or nuclear substances. The rule aims to protect the public from industrial disasters. Liability is absolute and non-delegable. The enterprise cannot escape liability by delegating work to contractors or employees. The duty to ensure safety is personal and absolute, and responsibility remains with the enterprise at all times. Compensation must be adequate and deterrent. Compensation awarded should be proportionate to the magnitude of harm and the capacity of the enterprise. The objective is not only to compensate victims but also to deter future negligence and promote higher safety standards. Conclusion. Absolute liability represents a progressive and victim-oriented approach in Indian tort law. It ensures that enterprises benefiting from hazardous activities bear the full cost of any harm caused, without relying on technical defenses. Liability arises without proof of negligence. Case law, Mehta v. Union of India. Facts: oleum gas leaked from a unit of Shriram Food and Fertilizer Industries in Delhi, causing death and serious injuries to workers and nearby residents. The company argued that it had taken reasonable care and that the leak was accidental. The victims approached the Supreme Court under Article 32 seeking compensation. The issue was whether the enterprise could escape liability without proof of negligence. The Supreme Court held the enterprise liable without requiring proof of negligence. It laid down that when an enterprise is engaged in hazardous activity, it is absolutely liable for any harm caused, irrespective of fault. No exceptions are allowed. Case law, Mehta v. Union of India. Facts: the management tried to rely on traditional exceptions of strict liability such as act of God and absence of negligence. It was argued that strict liability principles under English law should apply. The court examined whether such exceptions should protect industries dealing with dangerous substances in India. The court rejected all exceptions and held that absolute liability allows no defenses. Once damage is caused, the enterprise is liable regardless of circumstances. This marked a clear departure from the rule in Rylands v. Fletcher. Applies only to hazardous or inherently dangerous activities. Case law, Indian Council for Envirolegal Action v. Union of India. Facts: several chemical industries discharged toxic waste into surrounding soil and water, causing severe environmental damage and health hazards to villagers. The industries argued that pollution occurred over time and was not intentional. The question was whether industries dealing with hazardous chemicals could be held strictly responsible. The Supreme Court held that absolute liability applies only to hazardous or inherently dangerous activities. Enterprises engaged in such activities must bear full responsibility for damage caused to people and the environment. Liability is absolute and non-delegable. Case law, Indian Council for Envirolegal Action v. Union of India. Facts: the industries claimed that the pollution was caused by contractors and improper waste management systems operated by third parties. They argued that liability should be shifted to those actually responsible for handling waste. The court held that the liability is non-delegable. Enterprises cannot escape responsibility by blaming contractors or workers. The duty to ensure safety is absolute and always rests with the enterprise itself. Compensation must be adequate and deterrent. Case law, M. Mehta v. Union of India. Facts: the court considered the question of compensation for victims of industrial disasters. It examined whether compensation should be nominal or linked to the capacity of the enterprise. The victims had suffered irreversible health damage and loss of livelihood. The Supreme Court held that compensation must be adequate, proportional, and deterrent. It should depend on the magnitude of harm and the financial capacity of the enterprise, so that industries are discouraged from ignoring safety norms.